Charlotte, North Carolina, spring of 1977. The city hummed with the energy of a place on the rise. New office buildings downtown, the scent of blooming dogwoods along wide boulevards, and the distant rumble of traffic on I-77. But in the working-class neighborhoods south of the city, life moved slower. Rows of small brick houses lined quiet streets shaded by magnolias, where families scraped by on factory wages and diner tips. In one of those houses lived Sarah Mitchell, 24 years old, a single mother working the evening shift at a roadside cafe near the airport. Her home was modest, a one-bedroom rental with thin walls, a tiny kitchen, and a living room where her son, Henry James, slept in a second-hand crib pushed against the sofa. Henry was 8 months old, chubby cheeks, dark curls, big, curious eyes that followed every movement. He was the center of Sarah's world, the reason she dragged herself out of bed after long nights on her feet. Sarah's husband had walked out before Henry was born, leaving no note, no number, just an empty closet and unpaid bills. She paid rent from tips, bought formula on credit at the corner market, and kept the lights on by skipping her own meals when necessary. It wasn't easy, but it was hers. She managed. In late March that year, Henry came down with a bad ear infection. The fever spiked. He cried for hours, refused his bottle. Sarah missed 2 shifts to stay home with him, losing money she couldn't afford to lose. A neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, dropped by with soup and saw the worry etched on Sarah's face. "You need help, honey," she said. "That boy's burning up." The next afternoon, a knock came, sharp, official. Sarah opened the door to a woman in her late 50s, dressed in a charcoal gray suit, hair pinned neatly, carrying a leather portfolio. She introduced herself as Evelyn Hargrove, a field supervisor with the North Carolina Family Welfare Bureau. They were doing routine home visits in low-income areas, she explained, checking on infants and offering state-supported resources. Evelyn stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the room. The crib with its faded blanket, the stack of unpaid bills on the table, the half-empty formula cans. She spoke softly, sympathetically. "Your little one doesn't look well. Have you seen a doctor recently?" Sarah shook her head. "I can't afford it until payday. The free clinic has a long wait." Evelyn nodded, understanding. The state has programs for exactly this. Free pediatric evaluations for at-risk infants. No charge to you, no complicated forms. We can get him checked right away. She handed Sarah a business card, thick stock, embossed state seal in silver, Evelyn's name and the Bureau's Charlotte office address printed below. It looked completely legitimate. "I'll come back tomorrow morning," Evelyn said. "I'll take him to the evaluation center myself. It won't take long, a quick exam, perhaps some antibiotics. He'll be back before lunch." Sarah hesitated, but the fever worried her more than anything. She agreed. The next morning, just after 8:30, a plain gray sedan pulled up. Evelyn stepped out, clipboard in hand, smile warm. Sarah stood in the doorway, Henry bundled in a soft blue blanket against the cool spring air. "Sign here for consent," Evelyn said, sliding a single sheet across. "Just standard paperwork for the doctor's file." The print was small, the language dense. Medical authorization, temporary custody for evaluation, clauses about state oversight. Sarah skimmed it, signed quickly, her hand shaking slightly. Henry reached for her, tiny fingers clutching her collar. Evelyn lifted him gently, murmuring reassurances. The car door closed with a quiet thud. The sedan eased away, turning the corner. Sarah watched until it disappeared. She told herself it would be fine. By noon, she'd get a call saying Henry was okay. The call never came. By 1 p.m., worry turned to dread. She dialed the number on the card. It rang and rang, no answer. At 3, she tried. Again. Still nothing. By evening, she walked to the nearest payphone, called the county hospital, described the woman, the appointment. No record, no child named Henry Mitchell admitted that day. Panic rising, she took a bus to the Family Welfare Bureau office on Tryon Street. The building was real, gray concrete, state flag out front. Inside, the receptionist checked logs, binders, nothing. No visit scheduled, no Evelyn Hargrove assigned to her case that week. "Maybe you have the wrong branch," the woman said politely. "Try the health department downtown." Sarah went. Same result. No file, no appointment. That night she sat on the floor beside the empty crib, staring at the door, willing it to open. 2 days later, the phone on the card finally answered. A flat voice. The case was processed per protocol. When Sarah pressed for details, the line clicked dead. She returned to the Tryon Street office, voice rising. The receptionist smiled thinly. No record of that name or caseworker, perhaps a mix-up with another agency. The police station next. The desk sergeant directed her to Child Services. Child Services sent her back to the police. Each office passed her along. Forms in triplicate, promises of follow-up that never materialized. By the end of April, Sarah wrote her first letter to the State Welfare Board. No reply. A second letter returned stamped, "No record found." The summer of 1977 was brutal. Sarah sold the crib to cover rent, moved to a cheaper rooming house, took double shifts. She wrote more letters to hospitals, health departments, anyone with a title she could find in phone books. Every response the same. No file, no trace. She kept one photo of Henry in her wallet, folded behind the business card. The pain didn't fade. It settled in, a constant ache she carried through every shift, every sleepless night. By 1979, she left Charlotte, boarded a Greyhound to Raleigh, then later to Savannah, Georgia, anywhere the memories weren't so sharp. She carried a small box of Henry's things, onesies, a tiny hat, the blanket he'd been wrapped in that morning. She kept writing letters when strength allowed. Most came back unopened or with form replies. Case closed, no further information. In 1982, she stopped. The last letter to the state attorney general asked the only question that mattered. "Is my son alive?" The reply, weeks later, one line. "No record exists, case considered inactive." Meanwhile, in North Carolina, the Family Welfare Bureau continued operations. Evelyn Hargrove appeared in local papers occasionally, photos of her at charity events, stories praising her work placing children in stable homes. No one questioned the origins of those children, but by the mid-1980s, whispers started. Inconsistencies in adoption files, missing consents, altered certificates, payments labeled administrative fees. One file noted Mitchell, Henry James, status, deceased. No cause, no date, no documentation, just a stamp and a checkmark. For Sarah, answers came too late to heal anything. The system had erased her son on paper. Employees claimed no memory of the case when asked years later. In September 1988, Evelyn Hargrove, then 68, collapsed at home from a stroke. She died days later. That same week, the governor called for an audit after anonymous tips reached his office alleging widespread fraud in state adoption programs. Auditors arrived at the Tryon Street building. Many files had been shredded or burned. What remained showed patterns. Forged signatures, payments disguised as donations, children moved through a network of private agencies for cash. Estimates suggested over 2,500 infants affected between 1975 and 1988. The Bureau shut down overnight. Staff let go, doors padlocked. The state released a statement. Irregularities found, no criminal charges due to key personnel's passing. Newspapers ran brief stories calling Hargrove a dedicated public servant. No mention of the mothers left searching. Sarah read the obituary in a Savannah paper, October 1988. She circled the name in ink, then folded the page away. No closure, just the end of one chapter in someone else's life. The city moved on. New highways, new families. But in the quiet spaces, the story lingered for one person. Sarah remarried in 1990, took her husband's name, now Sarah Brooks, worked in hotel housekeeping. No more children. She couldn't bear the risk. She kept the box of Henry's things sealed in a closet. Every March, on the day he vanished, she lit a small candle by the window. No explanation to anyone. The years passed. 1990, 1995, 2000. Silence. In the early 2000s, the internet reached public libraries. Sarah learned basic searches at a community center in 2003. She typed North Carolina adoption fraud, 1970s, Evelyn Hargrove. Found old articles about the Bureau's closure, vague mentions of administrative issues, nothing concrete. She joined early online adoption registries listing Henry's birth details. Checked obsessively, no matches. Hope grew heavy, a weight she carried alone. In 2015, a national documentary aired, Lost Children: America's Hidden Adoption Scandals. It covered patterns across southern states. Coerced, signatures, falsified records, babies sold for profit. Sarah watched alone one evening. When the narrator mentioned North Carolina programs in the late 1970s, her heart stopped. A grainy photo appeared. Evelyn Hargrove in a gray suit, professional smile. Sarah froze. That face, those pinned-back glasses, the same woman who had stood in her doorway in 1977. She called out to her husband, voice trembling, "That's her. That's the woman who took Henry." The documentary ended with a helpline, the Carolina Adoption Justice Network. Sarah wrote everything down, hands shaking. That night, she couldn't sleep. For the first time in decades, she felt seen. The years after 1988 unfolded differently for Sarah Brooks than for the rest of the world. While Charlotte grew into a banking hub, skyscrapers rising along Tryon Street, new subdivisions swallowing old neighborhoods, Sarah lived in the quiet shadow of a single unanswered question. The small box of Henry's things stayed sealed in the back of her closet through every move, Savannah to Charleston in the early 1990s, then to a modest duplex in Myrtle Beach by 1995. She worked housekeeping at beachfront hotels, folding towels, scrubbing bathtubs, keeping her hands busy so her mind wouldn't wander too far. Her husband, Tom Brooks, a retired mechanic she met in 1989, never pushed when she grew quiet on certain days. He knew there was a child she'd lost before they met. She'd told him once, briefly, that Henry had been taken by the state for medical reasons and never returned. He didn't ask for more. Some griefs don't invite questions. Sarah avoided playgrounds, turned her face away when young mothers pushed strollers past her on the boardwalk. The sight of dark curls on a toddler boy still made her breath catch. She never told Tom the full story, not the business card, not the gray sedan, not the decades of letters stamped "no record." Silence became the safest place. In the late 1990s, computers appeared in public libraries. Sarah sat at one in 1998, hunting and pecking at the keys, searching North Carolina Family Welfare Bureau fraud and Evelyn Hargrove adoption. She found scanned newspaper clippings from 1988, short articles about the Bureau's closure after an audit revealed serious irregularities. One obituary for Hargrove called her a tireless advocate for children in need. No mention of the mothers who never saw their babies again. Sarah printed what she could, added the pages to the box beside Henry's blanket. She registered on the first wave of online adoption reunion boards, simple forums where people posted birth dates, locations, hopeful messages. She listed Henry's details. Born July 1976, Charlotte, North Carolina, taken April 1977. She checked every week, then every day when insomnia hit. No matches. The silence stretched on. By 2005, a few investigative pieces appeared online. Blog posts, small independent reports about Southern states' history of unregulated adoptions in the 1970s and 1980s. They spoke of baby brokers, falsified papers, payments funneled through private attorneys. One article estimated thousands of children had been quietly relocated, their original files destroyed or sealed. Sarah read them late at night, heart pounding, but none named her case. None listed Henry. In 2010, she turned 57. Arthritis crept into her fingers, making long shifts harder. She retired from the hotel, spent days at home with Tom, cooking simple meals, watching game shows. Every March, she still lit the candle by the kitchen window, watching the flame flicker until it burned down. Tom would sit with her sometimes, hand on her shoulder, saying nothing. Then came October 2016. Sarah was flipping channels one rainy Sunday evening when a documentary caught her eye. Stolen Futures, The Hidden History of America's Adoption Black Market. The title appeared in stark white letters. She froze, remote in hand. The narrator's voice was steady, measured. It described how, from the late 1960s through the 1980s, under-resourced state agencies and private networks exploited poor families, especially single mothers, using official-looking paperwork to remove infants under the guise of medical or welfare checks. Many babies were funneled into closed adoptions for cash, records altered or erased. Sarah leaned closer. The screen showed archival photos, file cabinets, rubber-stamped forms, grainy images of women in suits standing beside smiling adoptive parents. Then a name. One of the most active figures in North Carolina was Evelyn Hargrove, supervisor at the Family Welfare Bureau in Charlotte from 1974 to 1988. A black and white photograph filled the screen. Hargrove in her charcoal suit, hair-pinned, rimless glasses, that same composed half-smile Sarah had seen in her doorway 39 years earlier. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Tom," she whispered, voice cracking. "That's her. That's the woman." Tom came in from the kitchen, saw her face, sat beside her without a word. Sarah pointed at the screen, trembling. "She took Henry. Look at her. It's the same woman." The documentary continued. Hargrove had overseen hundreds, possibly thousands of placements. Many involved single-page consent forms signed under pressure or confusion. Babies vanished into the system, reappearing months later with new names and new families, often hundreds of miles away. Payments range from $3,000 to $10,000, disguised as fees. When the credits rolled, a white text box appeared. "If you believe you or someone you know was affected by illegal or coercive adoptions in the Carolinas between 1970 and 1990, contact the Carolina Adoption Justice Network. Help is available." Sarah scribbled the website and phone number on an envelope. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For nearly 4 decades she had carried this alone, convinced no one would believe her, that the system had won. Now a documentary had named the woman, shown her face, acknowledged the pattern. Other people knew. The next morning she wrote the letter by hand, words simple and raw. "My name is Sarah Brooks, formerly Mitchell." In April 1977, a woman named Evelyn Hargrove came to my home in Charlotte, North Carolina. She said she was from the Family Welfare Bureau and offered a free medical check for my 8-month-old son, Henry James. I signed a consent form. She took him in a gray car and never brought him back. I've searched ever since. Last night I saw her photograph on television. It was the same woman. Please help me find my son. She included every detail she remembered. The business card with the silver seal, the Tryon Street address, the clipboard, the sedan's quiet engine. She added her phone number, address, and the photo of Henry she'd kept all these years. Folded small, edges worn soft. She mailed it that afternoon, heart hammering as she dropped the envelope into the slot. Weeks passed. No reply. Sarah checked the mailbox twice daily, hope fading with each empty day. Then, in early December 2016, a thin envelope arrived, postmarked Charlotte Return Address, Carolina Adoption Justice Network, P.O. Box. She opened it with shaking fingers. The letter was typed, warm, signed by a case volunteer named Elena Carter. Dear Mrs. Brooks, thank you for reaching out after seeing the documentary. Your account matches patterns we have documented for several years. Short notice home visits, single-page consents, caseworkers who later disappeared from records, and children placed through affiliated private agencies. We would like to assist you. Please call me at the number below at your convenience so we can discuss next steps. With respect and hope, Elena Carter. Sarah read it 3 times, tears blurring the ink. She called that afternoon. Elena answered on the second ring. Mrs. Brooks. Sarah? Yes, Sarah managed, voice small. I've read your letter. I believe you. We're going to do everything we can to help you find Henry. For the first time in 39 years, Sarah felt the weight shift. Just a little. Over the following months, Elena and a small team of volunteers dug into what remained of the public records. Many files from the Family Welfare Bureau had been destroyed in 1988, but fragments survived in state archives, court orders, and cross-referenced adoption ledgers from private agencies that had worked with Hargrove's network. They searched birth date clusters, placement dates around mid-1977, southeastern states. Progress was slow, dead ends, redacted pages, sealed records, but Elena called every few weeks with updates, never letting Sarah feel forgotten. In July 2017, a promising lead surfaced. A male, infant birth date matching Henry's, had been placed in late 1977 with a family in Richmond, Virginia, through a now-defunct private adoption service linked to Hargrove's contacts. The adoptive parents had passed away years earlier, but the child had been renamed Daniel Robert Hayes. There was a driver's license record from 1995, a marriage certificate in 2001. Daniel Hayes now lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, less than 3 hours from Myrtle Beach. Elena explained carefully, "We can't contact him directly yet. Privacy laws protect adopted individuals, but we can reach out through a trained intermediary, a reunion specialist, who can explain the situation and ask if he's open to a DNA test." Sarah agreed instantly. "Please, just ask." The intermediary, a licensed social worker named Mark Ellis, made the first contact in September 2017. He explained to Daniel Hayes, then 41, married, a civil engineer with 2 young daughters, that a woman in South Carolina had been searching for her biological son taken in 1977. The dates, location, and physical description aligned closely. Daniel listened in stunned silence. He had always known he was adopted. His parents had been open about it, saying his birth mother was young and unable to keep him. They'd framed it as a loving choice. The idea that he might have been taken without real consent felt like the ground shifting beneath him. After several conversations with Mark, Daniel agreed to a DNA test. "I need to know," he said simply. Kits were mailed. 1 to Myrtle Beach, 1 to Raleigh. Sarah's swab was so shaky that Tom had to steady her hand. She sealed the envelope, mailed it, and waited. 4 weeks later, Elena called on a Tuesday afternoon in November 2017. "Sarah," she said, voice thick, "it's a match. Daniel Hayes is your son. Henry is alive. Sarah dropped the phone. Tom caught it, listened, then pulled her close as she sobbed against his shoulder. After 40 years, the silence broke. Elena continued gently when Sarah could speak again. He's in shock, but he wants to talk to you. He's ready when you are. Sarah whispered, I've been ready since the day he left. The first call came 2 days later, November 14th, 2017. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, phone in both hands. Tom sat across from her for support. When the line connected, a calm male voice answered. Hello, this is Daniel. Sarah's breath hitched. Daniel, this is Sarah. I'm your birth mother. I've been looking for you since April 1977. A long pause, then quietly, I've wondered about you my whole life. I just didn't know it would feel like this. They talked for almost 3 hours. Sarah told him everything. The spring morning, the woman in the gray suit, the form she signed without understanding, the empty crib, the letters, the candle, every march. Daniel listened without interruption. When she finished, he was crying softly. My parents were good people, he said. They loved me. They thought it was legitimate. They paid a fee, around $6,000, and believed you'd chosen adoption because you couldn't provide. They never knew. Sarah felt a wave of relief. I never stopped being your mother, even when I didn't know where you were. Daniel told her about his life, growing up in Richmond, studying engineering, marrying his college sweetheart, having 2 girls, ages 12 and 9, who had his dark curls. He'd always felt something missing, a quiet sense that his story didn't quite fit. I want to meet you, he said. Soon. They planned for late December 2017. Daniel would drive down with his wife and daughters for a quiet visit over the holidays. The weeks felt endless. Sarah cleaned obsessively, bought new towels for the guest room, baked cookies she hadn't made in years. Tom watched with quiet pride, helping where he could. On December 22nd, Sarah stood in the driveway as a silver SUV pulled up. Daniel stepped out first, tall, dark hair starting to gray at the temples, the same curious eyes she remembered from 1977. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Sarah whispered, Henry. Daniel shook his head gently, tears in his eyes. Daniel now, but I'm still the boy you wrapped in that blue blanket. They embraced, long, tight, wordless. His wife, Laura, stood back with the girls, smiling through tears. The grandchildren ran forward, hugging their new grandmother without hesitation. Inside, Sarah opened the box for the first time in decades. She showed Daniel the onesies, the tiny hat, the blanket. He held each item carefully, tracing the fabric with his fingers. He brought photos, his childhood, his wedding, his daughters. They pieced together the timeline. Hargrove had kept him in temporary foster care for 6 months, then placed him through a Virginia agency with new paperwork. The visit lasted 4 days. They talked late into the nights. Daniel met Tom, called him a good man for staying. The girls called Sarah Grandma Sarah immediately, climbing onto her lap, asking about the candle ritual. When they left, Sarah stood in the driveway, waving until the SUV disappeared. Then she went inside, lit the candle early that year, and let it burn all night. After that first meeting in December 2017, Sarah Brooks's life changed in ways she had never dared to imagine. Daniel and his family returned to Myrtle Beach in March 2018, exactly on the 41st anniversary of the day Henry was taken. This time, they stayed for a full week. Sarah took them for early morning walks along the beach when the sun was just rising and the waves were still gentle. Daniel pushed the stroller with his 2 little girls. Laura walked beside Sarah, and they talked about ordinary things, the weather, work, the girls' school projects. But beneath those everyday conversations lay something deeper. They were quietly rebuilding what had been stolen from them. Sarah opened the box of Henry's baby things again. This time it wasn't to grieve, but to share. Daniel held the tiny knit cap and smiled softly when he realized it still carried the faint scent of the past. Old fabric, baby formula, memory. His daughters, Emma, 12, and Lily, 9, sat cross-legged on the floor, asking their grandmother about every item. "Did you wrap Uncle Daniel in this blanket, Grandma?" Emma asked, eyes wide. Sarah nodded, her voice catching. "Yes, and he used to clutch this corner every time he slept." Daniel looked at his mother and said quietly, "I still hold the corner of my blanket when I sleep. I never knew why, but I always did." Sarah cried then, but they were softer tears, tears of healing. They started regular video calls. Every Sunday evening, Sarah and Tom sat in front of the laptop, waving as the granddaughters shouted, "Hi, Grandma Sarah! Hi, Grandpa Tom!" Daniel and Laura shared stories from their week. Sarah told them about small things in Myrtle Beach, going to the market, planting flowers in pots, reading on the porch. Those calls became the new heartbeat of her days. In 2019, Sarah and Tom flew to Raleigh for the first time. Daniel met them at the airport and hugged his mother tightly right in the arrivals area. The granddaughters ran forward and wrapped their arms around her legs. They stayed at Daniel's house for a week, a red brick home with a big backyard where the girls could run and play. Sarah sat on the porch swing, watching Daniel fix a bicycle for one of the girls, and thought, "This is what I lost. But now it's come back, in a different way." That same year, a local South Carolina newspaper published their story. The headline read, "After 42 years, a mother finds the son stolen by the system." It was a short piece, but it included a photo of Sarah and Daniel standing together on the beach, hands clasped. The story spread. A local TV station reached out, then a producer from a national cable network called. They wanted to feature Sarah and Daniel in a documentary series about illegal and coercive adoptions in America. Sarah hesitated at first. She didn't want to be in the spotlight, but Daniel said, "Mom, if our story helps even one other person, a mother still searching or a child wondering about their origins, then it's worth it." She agreed. The interview was filmed in June 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. They did preliminary Zoom sessions, then met in person at a small studio in Charlotte, the same city where it all began. Sarah sat beside Daniel on a sofa, their hands linked. The host asked what kept her going for more than 4 decades. Sarah paused, then answered slowly, "I didn't have any other choice. Every morning I woke up knowing my son was somewhere out there, maybe laughing, maybe crying, maybe growing up without knowing me. I couldn't let him think his mother had given up. Even when the world said, 'No record, case closed,' I still believed that one day the truth would find its way out." Daniel added, "I grew up thinking my birth mother had chosen adoption because she couldn't care for me. I didn't blame her, I was just sad. When I learned the truth, I wasn't angry at anyone. I just regretted the years we missed, but I'm grateful we're both still here to find each other." The episode aired in November 2020. Title, Taken: The Hidden Cost of Closed Adoptions. Sarah and Daniel's story was one of 3 main cases featured. At the end, white text appeared on a black screen. If you or someone you know was separated through coercive or illegal adoption practices in the 1970s to 1990s, contact the Carolina Adoption Justice Network or your state reunion registry. You are not alone. After the broadcast, the network received hundreds of emails and calls. Some led to other reunions. Some ended only with more sealed files and the same cold phrase, "No record found." But every story mattered. They reminded people that children are not commodities, that families cannot be erased with a stamp and paperwork. Sarah and Daniel stayed close. They met at least twice a year, once in Myrtle Beach in the summer, once in Raleigh at Christmas. The granddaughters called Sarah Grandma Sarah naturally, as if she had always been there. Sarah began doing things she never thought she would. Buying birthday gifts, sending Christmas cards with photos, teaching the girls how to bake cookies. Small, ordinary joys she had once believed were lost forever. In 2022, Sarah turned 69. Daniel hosted her birthday at his home in Raleigh. The table was full of cake, flowers, and laughter. When she blew out the candles, Sarah closed her eyes and made a wish. Not for herself, but for every mother still searching, every child still wondering, every family torn apart by greed and broken systems. When she opened her eyes, Daniel was smiling at her. "I love you, Mom," he said softly. Sarah squeezed his hand, tears falling freely. Their story didn't erase the 41 years that were stolen. Sarah still had nights when she lay awake, thinking about what might have been if she had read the form more carefully, asked one more question, or if the system hadn't turned its back. Daniel still had moments when he wondered about the other version of himself, the boy named Henry who might have grown up in Charlotte instead of Richmond. But they refused to let regret destroy what they had now. They chose to build a future instead of living forever in the past. In 2025, the Carolina Adoption Justice Network sent Sarah a thank you letter. They had facilitated more than 180 reunions since 2016, and her story had been one of their greatest sources of inspiration. Elena Carter, the woman who first called her in 2016, wrote, "Without mothers like you who refused to let go, these truths would have stayed buried. Thank you for never stopping." Sarah framed the letter and hung it on the wall beside the 2017 beach photo of her and Daniel holding hands at sunset. The box of Henry's baby clothes remained in the closet. She rarely opened it now, but she never threw it away. Sometimes she took it out, ran her fingers over the blue blanket, and smiled. There was no more pain, only gratitude. On a quiet spring evening in 2025, Sarah sat by the window looking out at the peaceful street. The candle was still lit every March, but now it no longer stood for loss. It stood for hope that had finally come true. This story isn't a perfect ending. It's a reminder. The truth sometimes takes decades to surface, but when it does, it has the power to change everything. If this story touched you, if you believe families deserve the truth, no matter how long they've waited, help us keep stories like this alive. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories of persistence, hope, and reunion. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because somewhere out there, another mother is still waiting for the call that will change her life, or another child is searching for where they came from. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Because in some place right now, another family is still searching, still hoping, still waiting. Thank you for being here, for listening, for caring about these real stories of human strength, stronger than any system ever built to break it. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep believing in the impossible.